And I'll try to put in all those experiences together for you to say understand the challenges that we have and the opportunities that we have in the agriculture sector. So with that, let me just start. So yeah. So we'll talk about the fintech in agribusiness today. Fintech, normally when we talk about fintech, we always consider or we always think about banking and to a large extent NBFCs. But there is a much wider aspect of, say, application of fintech, because finance is intertwined in almost everything in our life. So when you talk about agribusiness, any business for that matter, finance is an integral part. And if you can automate and if you can use technology to leverage the benefits in and make the say finance reach the last mile, I think that's where fintech comes in. So fintech in agribusiness, when you talk about say, unfortunately, agribusiness is not. It is one of the biggest area of application of fintech, but not talked about much. So it's like a second cousin to the normal fintech, agri-tech as we call it. There are a lot of things happening into this space, and it is one of the most promising sectors. So I'll be talking about that today. So what is our agenda for today? We'll be decoding agriculture. Not that, say, I want to talk about agriculture more, but I want to build a perspective about how agriculture is structured, not only in India, but globally, and what are the challenges that agriculture faces. And based on that, we'll see how fintech can actually, or how fintech is actually helping the agri-tech, how fintech is actually playing a role in agri-tech, or how fintech is actually revolutionizing the whole of agriculture sector. Then we'll talk about applications of fintech in agri, how the fintech has been applied into agriculture, the existing examples, and what are the new business models that have come up, and how these business models are actually making a difference. And finally, I'll end up with a case study, which I have myself worked on. This is using fintech in Ethiopia and how we transformed Ethiopian agriculture using the financial technology and the leveraging the financial technology in an environment which was very challenging. So these are the 4 things that we'll be speaking about today. So to begin with, let's start with decoding agriculture. Now, all of us know agriculture. All of us have been, say, aware of agriculture, and we have read about agriculture, especially in India. Agriculture is so intertwined with our social, political, and business lives. In India, we say, and all of my finance colleagues would agree, that even today, the finance minister of India has to see at the clouds to decide how the economy is going to perform. And that's something that's the importance of agriculture in our lives. And that's the importance of agriculture in our, say, businesses as well. So I'll just draw a perspective about agriculture and where we are, what are the challenges, what we need to do, and how things need to progress, what are, say, the whole overall overarching goals that agriculture has, and how this whole thing can be improved by fintech. So this will create the base for our future discussion about application of fintech and how we are going to talk, or how we are going to apply fintech into the agriculture segment. So with that, fintech in agri, let me start with a lighter note. Scope is immense, but application has to be right. A lot of time, a lot of people, and I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs who want to do something in agriculture, but they really do not understand agriculture. They really do not know what agriculture is. And sitting in an, say, cozy AC office, you really do not know what are the challenges on the ground. And I remember here in Ethiopia, when I was working with the agriculture, say, development, say, with the United Nations, and we were a team of around 10 international experts. So somebody had come from Morgan Stanley, somebody had come in US, somebody had come from Accenture, somebody had come from KPMG. So people from diverse backgrounds in developed economies. I came from India, having a strong background into commodity exchanges and say trading into commodity exchanges. I had moved out of multi-commodity exchange, one of the revolutionizing technology-based interventions into the commodity markets. And all of us were very much aware about what exactly technology is, how the world is looking at technology and everything. So we came and we started working in Ethiopia. We started to bring in new ideas, very upbeat about things that we wanted to do, things that can be done. We said, oh, wow, this is what can be done, that can be done. This is how we are bringing in. We're talking about things that were very much ahead of time in Ethiopia. And just because we come from that background, and we make a common mistake. A lot of times when we actually work or we come from a specific, say, background, we normally we take things for granted, that this is what the environment is. We are, without really actually going down to the ground and seeing what exactly is the implementation environment. And so I had a guest from one of the trading companies, and this was a person who was actually into agricultural export, too much into agriculture exports, has seen the world, used to travel a lot. And we told him, we are going to do this, we are going to do that. This is what we're going to do. We're going to bring Bloomberg to Ethiopia. We are going to bring Reuters to Ethiopia. And this is how it will happen and everything. So he was listening very carefully. And after about, say, 10, 15 minutes of our discussion, he says to me, how you exactly have made out, we are talking about coffee. And coffee is one of the major export commodity from Ethiopia. And one of the, so it is said that it's the birthplace of coffee. We'll talk about that more in a later part of the presentation. But when I started discussing about this, he said, you exactly understand how coffee moves from the port, which is Djibouti near Ethiopia, to Europe, and from Geneva, how does coffee go to US, and how does it ends up in a Starbucks, say, cafe? But do you understand how does the coffee move from the village in Sidama region to the port? And if you don't know that, you really don't know how to change the agriculture value chain. And that was an eye opener, because we thought that a lot of people that moving the product from say the farm to the port is the easiest thing to do. So we never realized, because that was what was there in our part of the world. In the developing and the developed nations, especially in the Western world, you have big farmers, especially in US or South Africa, you go, or even in some other geographies, Canada and all, you go, you see large scale farmers, very educated, Harvard educated farmers who are who drive an SUV, and they have a very elaborate technology adaptation. So for us to understand that how does the product move from the farmer to the port, was like, it's so simple. The farmer would harvest it and put it on the port. What the big deal? But that's not the case. When you actually go down to the grassroots level, and if you actually in India also, when you go down to the grassroots level and you see what is really happening at the grassroots level, you realize things are very different, very, very, very different. And that's why sometimes we really miss out on the technological, when we talk about technological adaptation and technological implementation, we really miss out on the real crux of the matter. What is the problem that we are trying to solve? And more than half of, and I've interacted, believe me, I've interacted with number of agripreneurs, people who are into agri-tech, people who want to do something in agri-tech. And when you start asking them basic questions, they have no answers, because we take it for granted. We understand the problem based on our perspective. We don't understand the problem based on the farmer's perspective. A farmer's perspective, a poor farmer somewhere in the village, say in Bihar, is very, very different. The reality is very different from what we perceive it to be a reality. And that is why understanding agriculture value chain and where can the value be added is very important. So that's something, say, we really need to understand. That's something we really need to say master in a way, if you want to really make a difference in agri-tech. I'm telling you, agri-tech is going to be the biggest buzzword, just like what mobile payments was there 5 years back. Agri-tech is going to be the same 5 years later. But understanding agri-tech and understanding how does value be added is something, it is very, very, very crucial. There's a startup company in Kenya. And Kenya, as I yesterday also said, is one of the pioneers when it comes to, say, adoption of technology. When the world was not aware of mobile payments to the level that we are now, Kenya was already interacting and using mobile payments. So that's how technology adoption happens. Sometimes what happens is when you have a plain slate, or when you have a plain canvas, you can paint a better picture. A country like India needs to unlearn a lot of things to relearn something new. But a country like Kenya, where it is nothing existing, building something new is much easier. So technology adoption in these countries is much easier. But at the end of the day, I was talking to somebody in Kenya, and we were talking about technology adoption and bringing in electronic systems to actually revolutionize the whole agriculture value chain and everything. And the investor, the person I was talking to was former undersecretary for Africa when the Bush administration was there. She was a lady called Jendai Fraser, who was reporting directly to Condoleezza Rice when Condoleezza Rice was the secretary of secretary in the Department of Foreign Affairs with Bush administration. So somebody who has grown up in America, somebody she's an Harvard educated, has seen all technological upgradations and things like that. And when we were talking about, she said, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to bring NASDAQ to Kenya." So I said, "Wow, that's a good thing. But really, do we really understand the environment within which NASDAQ would work?" And I gave her an example, and she laughed about it, and it was a very interesting discussion. I said, "Ma'am, you are actually trying to bring a Rolls Royce when you need a Land Cruiser. The roads in Kenya are not suitable for a Rolls Royce. It's suitable for an SUV like like a Land Cruiser. So choosing the right technology, choosing the right business model is so very important. Otherwise, what happens? You spend up a lot of money on the best of technology, and that is not usable. So understanding what will work and how it will work is very, very, very important. And that's what that's why I wanted to spend a little bit of more time on agriculture, understanding agriculture as a value chain. Now, value chain, if I say, what does a value chain mean? Value chain basically means how does the product move from the production to the ultimate consumption. So that's defined as value chain. Sometimes we call it a supply chain, but in agriculture context, it is called as value chain, because value is added at every stage of, the chain. So when the farmer produces it, farmer sells it to somebody, then it ultimately reaches, we in very, technical language, and this is something which a modern jargon has come up, we call about farm to fork. So when farm is where the product is grown, and fork is where it is consumed. Ultimately, it is consumed for human, for human health and for food. So from farm to fork, that's the value chain that normally we define. And there are multiple layers in this value chain, multiple actors in this value chain, and multiple challenges in this value chain. So if you look at a value chain, this diagram actually explains about the value chain that we have in agriculture, and this is across the world. So maybe it is slightly different in the American or the Canadian or the Australian or the Brazilian market, where you have large tracts of land where you have huge, farmers farming on, 1,000, 5,000, 7,000, 10,000 hectares of land, compared to somebody in India where you have average farm holding of less than 2 hectares per farmer. So these value chains would change, but the basic structure remains the same. So you have the global input suppliers. The input suppliers, input includes your seeds, input includes your fertilizers, input includes your even finance for that matter. So anything that goes into production is called as input. So agriculture is divided into 3 major sectors, or 3 major steps. The first is pre-harvest. Everything that you do before the harvest happens. Harvest is basically when the crop is ready to be taken from the field and put it for consumption. So before harvest is pre-harvest, where you put in all your inputs, you put in your efforts, you put in your money to grow the crop. Sowing and then harvesting. So harvest, pre-harvest, then you have the harvest, and then you have the post-harvest. So post-harvest is all about once the product has been, received by the farmer, how does it reach the next level of consumption? How does it go to the market? From the market, how does it go to the retailer? From retailer, how does it go to the consumer? And how does finally it get consumed? So understanding this whole thing is very important. And when I gave you the example of Ethiopia, it was like we were actually concentrating on a part of the value chain. We were talking about revolutionizing the movement of the product from port to the ultimate consumer. But that is a very, very small portion of the value chain. The major portion of value chain is How does it move from harvesting, say, from the coffee forests in the rural Ethiopian villages to the port? And that is something which we missed out understanding. And that was a big learning for me, that actually looking at a value chain approach is very, very significant. And that's what I've been doing, developing these value chains. We have worked on pulses value chain. We have worked on horticulture value chain, flower value chain, multiple value chain. How do you actually bring in technological interventions at each stage of the value chain so that the value chain gets developed? So if you look at this whole structure, you have the input suppliers, national input suppliers and global input suppliers. A lot of countries really depend on international input suppliers. Luckily, in India, we have a very small role of international input suppliers, but companies like Syngenta, companies like Monsanto, companies like Bayer, all these companies are international suppliers. They have been in India for umpteen number of years, but they are international. So the IPR of all these products, may it be seeds, developed seeds, may it be developed pesticides, all these things are held by international, say, suppliers. So we have international input suppliers who supply to the national input suppliers, and then these inputs are then consumed by the producers. So the farmers buy their product in terms of inputs, in terms of seeds, in terms of say improved varieties, in terms of say pesticides, in terms of fertilizer, in terms of say even now greenhouses and all those things, they become inputs. And that is what producer consumes. Then the producer produces, he uses the technology, the knowledge, understanding, traditional, modern, whatever mechanism he uses, then the product is ready. Once the product is ready, it goes to the processors and manufacturers, because whatever is standing in the field, for example, if you're growing rice or if you're growing paddy, you cannot consume it like that, or even pulses. All that thing goes to processors. So processors actually are large scale. So in India, we have processing spread out in SMEs. So we have smaller but hundreds of processors. If you look at a city like Indore, which is dominant player globally in two commodities, oil, and interestingly, say oil is something which I specialize in, edible oils, and the second is the pulses. So these are the two commodities that Indore specializes in. And if you go to the SMEs in India, 80% of SMEs in Indore are actually either oil manufacturing units, crushing plants, which extract oil and say make oil out of soybean, or they are into pulses processing, splitting the pulses and making dal out of it. So this is processors' work. So how does a farmer sell it to a processor? That is the next stage of the value chain. The processor processes it, huge quantities, bulk quantities they produce, and then they sell it to retailers and exporters. In some cases, it gets exported. For example, the oil meal or the extract of the soybean, once the oil has been extracted, the remaining portion of the say soybean, which is called as the oil meal, that is exported. And that's a huge international market. So that is exported. Retailers are there who sell these oil into small packets. Now, so we are more and more moving towards the customized or to the supermarket culture. Where we go into a supermarket and buy a packaged, say, oil or a packaged, say, food. Whereas when I was young and I was a kid, I used to go to a local kirana shop, and that you will find everywhere in India still today. And we would take a bottle for oil, and we'll tell him, give us half a liter of oil or half a kg of oil, and he'll pour it in our bottle. So these retailers had a different way of, or different mechanism of buying it from processors. The processors would actually put up big drums, and from those big drums, they would be selling it to retailers. Now things have changed. So processors integration of value chains are happening. Integration of value chain, we call it vertical integration. A lot of farmers are themselves putting in processing. And a very interesting concept in India has come up, which I think, and I can tell you this because I work with a lot of global agencies, and these global agencies are really eager to replicate that model into the international market, and that is the FPO, the farmer producer organizations. So farmer producer organizations is a replacement for cooperatives. Cooperative has been, except the developed world, in the developing and the underdeveloped world, cooperatives has been something which a lot of people don't like to talk about, because it has been a political tool rather than a social and economic tool. If you look at Maharashtra, the whole of the politics is controlled by the sugar cooperatives. If you go to UP, the same case. If you go to say Kenya, It's the same case. The coffee cooperatives and the tea cooperatives actually control the whole politics there. You go to Ethiopia, the coffee cooperatives are so important. The sesame cooperatives. So cooperatives have become something that people want to really look beyond. And that is where the farmer producer organizations are coming, which are structured for-profit companies set up by farmers. And NABARD, which is one of the pivotal, financing institution in India for agriculture financing, is actually putting in a lot of money in establishing these FPOs, the farmer producer organizations, as well as helping them set up small manufacturing units. So what is this happening? It is actually networking, or it is vertically integrating the farmers with the processors. A lot of farmers are actually turning into processors. And that is something which is where the value chain differentiation is blurring. You can actually see processors becoming exporters, exporters becoming processors, whole lot of thing happening. And that is where a lot of that is enabled by technology. Because now you have better technologies, you have more adoption of technologies, you have more reach to rural markets. And because of that, a lot of things are coming up. So that's how a value chain is. You have the input suppliers, you have the farmers, the processors, the retailers, and the ultimate consumers. Now, this can be a long value chain in India. If you look at, there are about 15 to 20 people who come into this value chain. So the input supplier would sell it, the input companies would sell it to the input suppliers, the wholesaler to retailers to village stores to farmer, then the farmer processors, farmer to processors, the farmers would sell it to big farmers, the big farmer would sell it to the processors, or to the adatia, as we call them, the adatias would sell it to the process. So it's a huge value chain. And what technology is doing is making this value chain, redistributing profits in these value chains. We do not say, and when I talk about the initiatives that we have taken and the technological interventions that we bring in multiple agriculture value chains, we never say that we are here to displace anyone, because that's a politically potent statement. That's a very politically very charged up statement that can create a lot of ripples in the society, because there's a very well functioning value chain in which everybody is benefiting, except the poor farmer, to be very honest. And this is across the globe. So when you talk about redefining the value chain, a lot of people don't like it, because people who are benefiting from the inefficiencies of the value chain really do not want to say let go their profits. And this is globally, and that's why so you have to actually come up with models that does not displace anyone, that just reassigns the profits. And reassigning of the profit means you need to create a system where the farmer, the producer, the retailer, the processors, everybody get their fair profit. No, there is no situation where somebody is getting extremely high profit and somebody is not even able to make in the break even. So that's what is rationalizing of value chain, and that is what technology is doing. It is empowering a lot of people who are before the advent of technology, before the advent of agri-tech, people who are very, very disadvantaged. And I'll give you again a small example. When we worked in a country like Malawi, which is again a very small country in southern Africa, we realized that there are big players, big traders who are buying it from farmers. And what they're telling the farmers, I'll give you the example of pulses. And India imports, I don't know how many of you know, but the tur or the arhar, the pigeon peas that we call it in English, that is about 100,000 ton, 1 lakh ton of pigeon peas come from Malawi every year into India. Our consumption is more than 6 lakhs. Our production is less than 4 lakhs. The remaining 2 lakhs is imported. Something comes from Myanmar, something comes from Tanzania, and a lot comes from Malawi. So when we spoke to a company, when we were there to work on redeveloping the value chain for pulses and helping the farmers gain their real benefit, we realized that the product that actually is sold at $600 per ton in India, the FOB value. FOB value is basically the value of delivery at the port. So an Indian importer is buying pulses from or dal, not the processed dal, but the raw dal from Malawi at $600 per ton. 650, I think that was 613 or 14 something was the price, exact price. And this is September 2014 when I conducted a study on this. So September 2012, in fact. So it was $613, $614. That Indian importer was paying to buy those products. When you go to Malawi and you ask the Malawian farmer how much he gets, you would be surprised that he gets less than $150. So $150 is what the farmer gets, and there is no value addition except transportation and packaging. There is no value addition. It is not processed done. 115 growing up to 615, a $500 gap. And what is the value addition? Transportation from the farmer to the port, from the port to the logistics, basically from the farmer to the port, and port to the to the Indian port. Then packaging, cleaning, packaging, all these things. If you put all that cost together, it will come out to be not more than $200. So something that $350 worth product is there is actually being sold at $600, and $250, close to 50% is the margin of the intermediary. And this just needs to be rationalized. And why farmers, and if you go to and talk to the farmers, they were really happy. They're saying, yes, we are happy because we are getting what we anticipate. And why? Because they were told, see, you grow maize. Maize is makkah. So you grow maize, and the price of maize is say $100 per ton. I'll give you 150. You grow pulses. So for him, the lack of information about the international market was causing him to sell something which was worth $400 at a price of say something like $150. So that's the price of ignorance that the farmer was paying. And then we came in, and of course there were a lot of resistance, because we were actually trying to eat up into the market of somebody who's making $250 on a $600 transaction. So we said, no, this does not work. Then we gave a presentation. I was at a CIA conference, India Africa Partnership Conference, in speaking about the innovative models in agri-tech and the new experiments that we were doing and we had implemented. And alongside me was the agriculture minister of Malawi. So when I made my presentation, he was like, we produce a lot of pulses. I said, yes, minister, I know. India actually imports 100,000 tons of pulses to from Malawi every year. And he was like, really, 100,000 tons? Where does the money go? I said, minister, that is for you to find out where does the money go. Because I can tell you what India is importing. But imagine if a agricultural minister of a country doesn't know his country is exporting 100,000 tons of pulses, then there is something seriously wrong. And that was the point where he said, I really want to do this thing in Malawi. And then he invited us, we did. And today we are actually enabling, and about 2 weeks later, we are having a buyer to seller meeting, where the Indian buyers can interact with Malawian farmers and Malawian traders. And we are actually have, brought down, rationalized the value chain. The product that was sold by Malawian farmers at $150 now is actually sold at, something around 300, 350, 400. Yesterday, I spoke to my colleague in Malawi, one of my known persons in Malawi, to get the prices, and he was giving me a quote of $413. So imagine a farmer increasing his price. He's not increasing his output. He's not doing anything new. It's just that information that you have brought in through a technological intervention. And what is that technological intervention? It's just this phone. So we created a system where every day the Indian market prices would be texted on his phone. That's just what we did initially. Then we created a market and a whole lot of things, and I'll talk about those interventions in the later stage of the presentation. But the point is, we actually rationalized the whole value chain, and we empowered the farmers with a lot of information, with a lot of opportunities, and connect. And that meant that the farmer could actually get a much fairer opportunity in the value chain. So understanding this value chain and understanding where the problem lies. Sometimes I've seen technology companies trying to solve a problem that has already been solved. And that doesn't work in agri-tech, because a lot of technology companies do not come from an agricultural background. And that's why this is very, very important. So if you look at the issues in development of value chain, what exactly are the challenges? So we have farmers, we have warehouses, we have traders, all of them primary producers. These are the people who produce the product. So there is lack of grading services, lack of storage, liquidity for the farmer. Now, if you look at this slide, I have highlighted the areas which are pertaining specifically to finance. And you can see finance is embedded in each and every aspect of the value chain. So that is why agri-tech has become so important, and fintech in agriculture has become so important. So liquidity at the farmers end, grading facilities, storage facilities, If you go to say any APMC is the mandi in common parlance that we call. You go to any mandi, just see how the transaction happens. And I sometimes say speak to people and I tell them that the effort of the say farmer is so casually evaluated. So what they do, you go to the farmer, to the mandi, the traders would pick up the grain, just toss it in the air, and they say, oh, this is not a good quality, I'll not pay you this much, I'll pay you this much. It's an absolute sham, in my opinion. It's my personal opinion, but that's a sham, because that's a way of defrauding the farmer. Because you are actually, without any objective standards, without any objective factors, you're just telling him this is not good grade. And because the farmer does not have a grading facility, does not have a document to show you that this is what quality is actually he's cheated. Storage is another problem. Warehouses are prohibitively expensive. There are a lot of warehouses that have been built, and it very ironically in countries like India, or countries even in developing countries like Sri Lanka I've worked in, Malawi I've worked in, Ethiopia I've worked in, Ghana I've worked in. 10 different countries I've worked into this segment. And everywhere you find, this space is not the problem. You have a lot of warehouses built. Because what happened in 1990s, this concept of making the agriculture free, the privatization concept, and the private sector driven laissez-faire economy, that concepts came in. And that led a lot of government to make investments into infrastructure rather than controlling the markets. So dismantling of the marketing boards happened globally earlier. If you know, before 1991, we used to have marketing boards in India as well as in all the developing countries. The marketing boards would decide at what price to sell, what to do, and everything. The market was actually controlled by these marketing boards. So they started to be dismantling. The World Bank took up an agenda of actually privatizing the businesses of agriculture. And they said government should build up infrastructure, and a lot of money was invested into building up infrastructure. So today in India, or in Kenya, or in Tanzania, or in Malawi, or in Sri Lanka, or in any other country, in Myanmar, anywhere you go, you have a lot of warehouses built. But those warehouses are not usable, because those warehouses do not have a business model to use. And because of that, the farmers, on one hand, we hear news about the farmer's product being rotting in the field. He does not have a storage place, all this thing. The solution, in my opinion, is not building warehouses. The solution is actually linking warehouses to the farmers. Just imagine about Uber. Before Uber came in, a lot of people had cars. A lot of cars were there. A lot of people needing the cars were there. But there was no mechanism of matching these two. If you go to US, there's a very interesting app similar to Uber, which is called as Lyft. And Lyft is basically, these are people who say after their work, want to make some extra earning, have a car, they offer say taxi services. The supply, they didn't bring in more commodity, they didn't bring in more cars, they didn't bring in more drivers. What they did was they just connected the ideal drivers or the ideal drivers who wanted to offer services to the customers. That's what they did. And that's what we need to do in agriculture. If we can develop an intervention that would connect the warehouses with the farmers, probably we can see the farmers getting what he want, the warehouses getting what they want, and it's a win-win solution. But that is not happening. Today, if you go to the Central Warehousing Corporation or you go to the State Warehousing Corporations, huge infrastructures are there. And what are they used for? Storing liquors, storing something industrial products, because they don't have agriculture products to store. You go to a farmer, he'll tell you, I can't store the product because I don't have the access to the warehouse. I don't know where the warehouse is. Similarly, when just again, I'm taking you back to the example of Uber. Before Uber came in, just imagine how difficult it was to get a cab. Now, if we even don't think that taking a cab is is a challenge, or you don't even plan for your time to take a cab. You say, okay, whenever I'm ready, I'll just book it and the cab would be there at my doorstep. Why? Because we have a technology intervention linking the demand and the supply. And that is what the same technological intervention, and I'm building a system around that. And if this works out, it would be something which would revolutionize the whole warehousing system. So that's the farmer and the producer organizations. Then processors, aggregators, exporters, they need a consistent supply. Consistent supply in the sense, the farmers, if you actually look at the processors, a lot of, and we did this study in a lot of countries, we realized that the processors pay lesser to the farmers because a lot of their cost is actually associated with warehousing. So what processors do, when the harvest comes, they go to the market, buy all the harvest, and then they put it into their warehouses and they use it over the year. Because they know after 3 months, when the harvest period is over and I want some product and I want the input for my processing, I would not find it in the market. So that is why I have to invest my working capital in actually buying the product and putting it in the warehouse. And any finance, say, student would tell you, or anybody who knows finance would tell you, if you have a lot of working capital blocked into, say, your raw material, that's not a good sign for organization. But you have to do that. You don't have an option around that because you don't have a consistent supply. Cost of collection is very high. Now, if you say the reason why, say I gave you the example of Malawi, why the company was charging $450 over, or why the gap was $450, the reason was very simple. This company had to go village by village with a truck. They had to give cash to the truck owner or the truck driver. The truck driver would drive from village to village, collecting 10 bags, 15 bags, 20 bags, whatever he gets in that village, putting it in the truck, and evening coming back to the warehouse. So that would mean that the risk factor is very high. Imagine you paying, say, 100,000, 1 lakh rupee to a truck driver and telling him, go around and buy and bring it back to me in the evening. You're actually risking that money. So the risk capital or the risk, say, premium would also build up in your profit margins. If you can de-risk that, if you can create a system, if you can bring in an intervention that would allow, say, you to buy, say, at a warehouse without actually going multiple locations, your cost of collection would come down. And if your cost of collection would come down, you would be happy sharing that much portion of your cost with the farmer. So it's a simple intervention that can bring in a lot of value to the farmer. So financing needs of, say, huge storage, that is another challenge, because you need to really put in a lot of money into storage. You have to go and buy a lot of, say, product. So banks would have to finance. The banks, financing by banks was another nightmare, because banks would not be very comfortable financing against something which is, say, perishable. So financing at the storage level, at the processor level, was again a challenge, or is again a challenge in many cases. Then at the local and international buyers and retailers, there are contract defaults, and this is rampant. You agree to export some product, the prices go up, you don't export, you export it to somebody else. The contract defaults happen, and this was something which was one of the major reasons why, and I spoke to, when I did this study in Malawi, I spoke to these traders in India, and I said, why don't you buy it from the farmers directly, or from the entities in Malawi directly? Why do you actually pay this company, which said, we know that we can get it at a much cheaper rate if we go to Malawi. But then the premium of contract default, the premium of the risk, that I actually assume that this is my premium for the insurance against a contract default. If I go to Malawi and there is a default, I don't know who to chase, how to chase, and my cost will become multifold if I actually have that. So then it is much easier for me to pay these companies. So what these companies were doing, these companies were creating values. When you actually look at, they were creating some values which can be reduced in cost by electronic interventions and created by somebody else. You can or you can democratize the value creation as it goes down, or as it at a lower level. You don't need to pay high premiums. And that is what the whole intervention in the value chain is. So this is what the issues in the development of the value chain are. If you look at the financing needs, I spoke about financing needs at every stage. So if you look at input suppliers, there is input financing, payment in kind or cash. A farmer needs to buy product in cash. And farmers in our country are the poorest lot. Believe me or not, they are the biggest. And I spoke this at one of the conference in UN when I was a part of a task force. And I said, the irony is that the poorest guy in the system is the biggest creditor. Poorest guy in the system is the biggest creditor, because what happens, and what used to happen in many African countries, and still now it happens, the farmer will buy the product in cash, inputs from the input suppliers. He doesn't have a bank account. He doesn't have a credibility certificate to take loan. A farmer is always a person who is considered to be the highest risk, say individual, and banks really don't lend to farmers say directly globally. Not about the American or the European or the Brazilian farmers or the Australian farmers who are entrepreneurs in themselves, but a small farmer who has less than 2 hectares of land. So he buys in cash, he grows the crop, he gives it to the trader. The trader gives it to the retailer. The retailer or the exporter exports it. When the export proceeds come, then the farmer is paid. Who is financing this whole export trade? It's the farmer. The money that should have been got into the farmer's pocket is actually being retained by the exporter to finance his export business. And that is why a poor farmer in the system is the biggest creditor. And that's the irony of the system. Because he doesn't have bargaining power, he doesn't have, say, mechanisms to, there's nothing on his side. So the input supplier, there is input financing need. He needs to buy product, he needs to buy seeds, he needs to buy fertilizers, he needs to buy equipments, he needs to hire implements. All those things have to happen. So all that is either in cash or in kind. So they need that. Then they sell it to aggregator, assuming the aggregator pays them. Then the aggregator needs working capital. The processor needs working capital because processor needs to buy products and store it in his workplace or in his godown. And that would mean that the whole years of say stock would be actually retained by him, which is something which would be very, very expensive for him. So he needs financing for that. Purchasing in credit and repayment after sales to the retailer. So retailer would actually not give the cash to wholesaler again. So there is 90-day credit. And then the consumer short-term credit financing. So retailer to consumer is a cash deal, but remaining all are credit deals where you need to invest into your working capital. And this is where at every stage you need to bring in, say, financing. In India, we had the priority sector lending, as you all know. Priority sector lending is lending against or lending in the agriculture sector as a priority sector. A certain percentage of the bank's say lending portfolio should and by default should be into agriculture. But that would mean that the banks are at risk. So banks were very averse. So what bank found a very interesting and a very convenient way of actually complying with the regulation, but at the same time maintaining the risk. So they would lend it to wholesalers or processors, people who are credit worthy. But who needs it more? The farmer. And for financing the farmer's production and pre-harvest financing was something which is very, very difficult. Now with the Kisan credit card and a few financial innovations, things have changed. But earlier that was very difficult, and that remains difficult still because a lot of products, the farmers do not really get the support in terms of financing for input financing and all those things. So the problem is if you talk to banks, and I've interacted with multiple banks across the geographies, they would tell you, the farmer, how do we trust the farmer? How do we actually guarantee the prepayment of our loan? And that is something where a technology needs to be brought in, because a banker really does not understand the credit worthiness of a farmer looking at his farm, because the banker doesn't understand agriculture. He needs a lot of technological support to actually understand and risk profile a farmer in the correct way. A lot of time, the perception of the farmer creates the risk profile, which should change with an objective standard. A lot of subjectivity is there in agriculture value chains, which needs to go out, and objectivity needs to come in. Objectivity means a lot of information processed and data processed, which would actually be giving you indicators to take a more informed decision. And that is what, say, in financing, at least we need in agriculture. So the perennial problem that agriculture in developing economies has, there is a time lag between input investment and profit realization. So the farmer would buy the input, wait for 3 months if he's growing a small variety crop, and wait for 6 months if he's going a large variety crop. When the product would be ready, that time he's going to get the money. So the time lag between the investment into the input and the profit realization is huge. And during that period, he is exposed to covariate risk like the weather. If weather is say bad, or weather is not supporting him, the investment goes dead. And this is every time we listen, every year we listen that the untimely rains, say untimely, right now we are facing a extreme heat wave. This is going to impact a lot of production. Last year, there was untimely rains, which actually say impacted the whole say pulses production in India. As I told you, the tur dal or the pigeon pea production in India, it's about 4 lakh tons, and that has gone down significantly. About 20 to 25% shortfall in that happened, and we don't know. The farmers didn't know what to do because they have no mechanism. Now insurance has come in, a lot of things are coming in, but that is still very slow. We need agri-tech to actually speed up these interventions. Set of interlocking problems both on supply as financial crunches are there, as they face challenges. The financial institutions really face large and systematic risk. As I said, banks really do not want to lend to the farmer because they see this as a very high risk say initiative, and providing credit to agriculture is very, very difficult for banks. Farmers face risk beyond their control, and they're trying to finance the investment necessary to increase the productivity. So what happens is it has become a chicken and egg story. The financing is not there because of that the farmer cannot go to the next level. Because he's not going to the next level, his creditworthiness is not improving. Because he's not creditworthy, if he wants to set up a irrigation to reduce his dependency on weather, he needs money. But nobody is ready to finance irrigation facilities because he's not creditworthy. So now with fintech coming into picture, a lot of these things are changing, and how that is changing, that is that we're going to see. So this is how the whole circle works. You have input management. You need liquidity to say buy the inputs. So you have to they need financing for inputs. Once the input is ready, harvesting is done, you need storage capacity. Because if you don't store it properly, the value goes down. I'll give you an example of say maize or even soya or groundnuts. If you harvest that groundnut and put it into open, the moisture content in the product, which is secreted because of the weather, the heat, creates a chemical. It secretes a chemical called aflatoxin, and aflatoxin is dangerous for human health. And WHO, World Health Organization, has made it mandatory that there should be zero aflatoxin for human consumption, which means that European markets and the American markets would not import from you if your product has an aflatoxin residue. So that means that if you're not harvesting and you're not storing it properly, you may actually lose the value, and a lot of value is lost because of that. In India, a lot of value of products are lost because we do not have storage capacities. We are not using the storage capacities would be the right word. So we need affordable storage. The storage is there, but it is extremely high because the business models are not there. Banks do not finance against, say, stocks kept in warehouse. So say the cost is very high. So all that things are there. Once the harvesting is done, then you need trading. Efficient markets, appropriate say prices. Now the problem is when the market, and this is a perennial problem in agriculture, when the harvest season comes, the prices just tank. And the best example is onion. Every year in India, onion prices go down and onion prices go up, go down at a level where farmers throw it away, go up at a level where we stop eating onions. And that is something which is in every agriculture product. So when the harvest comes, see, the supply and demand is a highly mismatched phenomena in agriculture. When you actually bring in, harvest, everybody sells at the same time. So you have huge supply at that time, supply spikes. And then at the same time, the demand is spread out across the year. So then the demand actually, when the supply goes down and the demand is high, the prices go up. And this keeps on happening. So if you create an efficient market and appropriate prices are offered, and this can happen when the additional liquidity is sucked out of the market. And that will happen with affordable storage. So if storage is there, a farmer would say, for example, and cold storage is established somewhere in the Nashik district. Not that they're not there, but I'm just giving you an example. So you put up a cold storage, the farmer would say, why do I sell it at a price which is not affordable to me? I'll just put it into the storage. And then when the prices go up, I'll come it out and sell it, provided the cost of storage is justified by the holding period, or the rise in price justifies the storage cost. And that is where affordable storage becomes important. So when you do that, you can actually create an appropriate pricing mechanism, and you need a robust trading system. Now, what is another problem in agriculture trading is, I go to a mandi and I have 10 different traders. I have access to only these 10 traders. And this is a Harvard study which they did on fisheries. So Harvard Business School did a study on fishery markets in Chennai. And what they found out was, and how this whole thing worked was, the fishermen would go into the high seas and fetch the fish and bring it to their destination ports. And that is where they would sell. Mobile was introduced to these, say, fishermen. And when the fishermen went into the, say, high seas, and before coming to the shore, they would call and confirm the prices of product, or confirm the prices of the fishes in 4 different markets. And they realized that they can actually get a price better in a market which is 100 kilometers away. So they would sail to that market, sell it there, get 100 higher value, and then go back to their villages. And this was the Harvard study which proved that the technological intervention of a small instrument like a mobile phone, say, access, or a mobile phone connectivity can go a huge way in increasing the farmer's income. Because the farmer or the producer can then decide, or the fisherman can decide. Fisherman is just an example. This can be replicated in any value chain. So the fisherman can decide which market offers me better. And we all know, having studied economics in our in our student life or early education, we realize that whenever the markets, whichever markets are better priced, you tend to go to those markets. That's basic human nature. So if you know that a market is giving you a better price, more markets means better opportunities. More markets means more wider, price base. So that is something which actually is a small example of how a very small technological innovation, it's really not an innovation, it's just an innovative way of using a technology. A mobile phone used by a fisherman can actually help him in getting significant revenues. And that is what can be replicated. So creating a market that brings more buyers to the farmer is something that can actually be a revolutionizing step. And that is why I believe that initiatives like ENAM, which the government of India is taking, is a significant step forward towards towards improving the livelihoods of the farmers. And this is not a political statement, but this is what I have studied, and this is what has proved from multiple research across the globe. Fund transfers. The farmer needs the immediate payments because he needs to pay for his dues, he needs to pay for his next harvest, he needs to pay a lot of things. What does the farmer have? Farmer cannot wait for the retailer to give him the money after 3 months or 6 months. He needs immediate payment. And how do you actually ensure immediate payment? You need a mechanism of paying the farmers the moment the trade is actually done. And if this can be revolutionized, this can be done in through a technological intervention, I think we can solve a lot of problems. And then that liquidity, which the farmer gets because he has got immediately paid, he can use for a better input management, and then the whole circle can actually work. So that is what end-to-end solution is required. So Indian agriculture, again, 58% of the population is dependent on agriculture and allied industry. We are talking about a $275 billion worth transactions. Agriculture in India is $275 billion. That's a huge number. We don't realize it because 90% of agriculture is unorganized. We don't see companies creating a billion. We don't see unicorns being created into agri value chains simply because there is a lot of decentralization. There is a lot of unorganized sector, but the overall value of this sector in India is $275 billion. This is more than the GDP of several countries in the world. Just imagine in that perspective how significant this is. 58% of the population depends on agriculture. 18% is the contribution to the GDP growth. Then 35 billion is our exports. Rice is a major export, horticulture crops, floriculture is an export. We export a lot of spices, we export a lot of processed foods, like we export cashew, and we export ground spices and everything. So whole lot of processing is there, 35 billion, and we are still talking about underutilization of our capacities in agriculture. If you look at the real value, this $275 billion can actually raise up to $300 to $350 billion in no time. And that is something that we should really concentrate upon. 19 billion US dollars has been allocated in the budget for the agriculture, which is again huge amount. So when you actually look at this sector, it's a very, very significant sector. Now let's talk about fintech in agriculture. How does fintech play a role? So both macro and micro roles of agriculture development are required and for a structural transformation. So what are the macro roles? Macro roles are overall, increasing the overall efficiency of the value chain. So if you can actually create a value chain that is more efficient, that distributes profit better, you actually have a better macro levels you bring in changes. Micro level changes are increasing productivity of a farmer, increasing giving subsistence to the farmer, giving him assistance to sustain. All these are macro initiatives. But micro initiatives. What we need, in my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, that we need macro initiatives so that the value chain becomes more and more harmonized. We have better value chains working. When we speak to adjust agriculture policy at a moment in time, the levers for these two purposes are very different. So when you're talking about how do agriculture develop, how would you develop agriculture? If you want to go for a macro development, you need a different set of policies. If you go for a micro development, you need a different set of policies. These are two different levers, if you call it. Overall economy, if you look at a value added, export market, all these things, if we actually harmonize the value chain, we create value in all these segments. But if we go for micro, we only create value at farm level. And that is why I say that macro level changes are more important. Fintech must drive mechanization in capacities, manage complex set of risk, and bring world market in terms of quality certification, handling, exposure, price fluctuation, external demand. All these things can actually be addressed by fintech. So we need fintech at each stage of agriculture, value chain. And agritech, which is also called as fintech within agriculture, specializes in the discipline of financial technologies in agriculture, as I said. So if we go, if we look at the key, So there are key fintechs that you should look at globally. There are a number of fintech interventions into agriculture or agri-tech companies that have come up. India is again home to a lot of these changes, but these are very early stage. So these are really not making up to the international benchmarks. But these are the international benchmarks. Figured is a New Zealand-based, fintech, which is working to help the farmers financially plan better, combine planning, resource management, accounting, everything together, so a farmer can do better. Now, in New Zealand, you have big farmers. These farmers may not be so sophisticated, but they are more sophisticated when it comes to production, and they are more techno-friendly, if you call them. So there are a lot of things that these farmers are doing, which we are really we need to replicate. So they are helping them. They have 60 staff in Australia, New Zealand, US, UK, and they are increasing. And that's something which is a fintech tool or the agri-tech company to look at. Crowd is another thing, which is 78% of the Indonesian farmers. When you look at, they struggle to access finance. This crowd actually provides a peer-to-peer lending platform. So it's like an electronic or a digital cooperative. Why cooperative was set up? So that peer-to-peer lending can be promoted. This is actually creating that. So farmers who have better, resources, they can actually lend to their peers in farming. And this has become an exciting fintech in Indonesia with about 18,000 customers and 62,000 registered lenders. So it is actually bringing in a lot of lending solutions into the unorganized sector of agriculture. Farm Drive is another very interesting initiative in Kenya. Where the small and marginal farmers in Kenya, they're building their credit score, who have difficulty in building their credit score. The technology helps them record their incomes, their mobile phones, and as you know, about 25% of the economy in Kenya works on M-Pesa. So everything is mobile money. So the mobile money company Safaricom, that is the company that introduced the M-Pesa. Safaricom actually has a lot of data on the financial viability of a farmer. So they are putting all that thing together, and they're creating a database that would allow the banks to look at these farmers and say how creditworthy they are. So they are in informal sector. They do not have formal documents to actually account their credibility or creditability, but this initiative is actually helping them build that. So a lot of that is bringing in formal financing into the Kenyan farmers. Product Pay is this was founded in 2015 in US. This works across US, Mexico, and Latin America. It is basically a cash flow cycle for fresh produce, and it works on a supply chain platform. So you can actually do invoice financing. Invoice financing is an interesting thing that is happening. When you have actually, suppose you are actually going to receive, you have actually raised an invoice which is you're going to pay. You can actually discount that invoice with a financier. And that is something that brings in a lot of liquidity into the system. It is something which can be considered as a factoring, and international factoring also happens. So this supply chain is actually helping them. My Agro is another small farmers. This is in Mali, a small country in West Africa, where the lawyers they allow the customers to take pre-pay plans for seeds and say the vital supplies in small increments. So what they do is they create a platform where small value of inputs can actually be accessed with a prepaid plan. And so when the farmer has liquidity, he can pay, create an account, and using that account, he can actually get the inputs when he requires at a later stage. So these are few things which are there. There are a lot of other fintechs which are coming up. If you look at India, and let's talk about India as a fintech sector, India has about 3,116 registered startups in food and agriculture. That's a huge number. When you look at the number of fintechs in India and the amount of money that has gone into fintech in India, it's a huge sector. India is second when it comes to the number of agri-techs. But how many of those agri-techs are really profitable is something which you need to see. A lot of these agri-techs are still exploring. A lot of these agri-techs are still working on business models, and they're still fine-tuning their business models. But there is definitely a lot of work happening into agri-tech. Second largest, we are one of the largest agriculture markets in the world, most diversified agriculture markets in the world, coupled with the most advanced, fintech destination. Yesterday, we saw that India is one of the fastest growing fintech destinations. So we have both the things in the world. We have the largest agriculture market, and we have the best fintech initiatives. So that is where these two are coming together. And I talked to a lot of fund managers, and a lot of fund managers have set up specific agri-tech funds. The problem is they really do not know where to invest. They really do not know which initiative to invest, because if it is something related to finance, if it is something related to banking, you find a lot of experts who can tell you that this model is going to work or not work. But in agri, it's very difficult to predict the success of an model and an intervention. So that is why the fintech companies are finding it a little bit difficult. Experts in terms of fintech business modeling are comparatively less as compared to banking or other sets of fintech interventions. 25 to 30% growth in number of startups on a year-to-year basis. It's a huge number. And a lot of these startups I'm consulting with, and I know a lot of time I have to spend is actually helping them understand the business model, because they create a business model which really needs to be tested on ground in terms of viability. And a lot of times you realize that the viability is not there. And that is where a lot of startups actually lose the steam. So getting the startups to identify these business models and how their business models would actually be transformative is something which is very important. A lot of those comes with, I'll give you an example of intervention, a fintech intervention. It is borderlines between agriculture and retail trade. It is called Shop Kirana. Now they're actually creating a lot of interesting. They started with a retail trade intervention, a retail trade fintech, where they created a platform where a normal or small Kirana shop owner can actually access directly from the factories. So Procter & Gamble or Parle factory can actually send it to the small Kirana store. and they were aggregators. They actually became aggregators. This fintech company was an aggregator. Now they are going into an advanced stage where they're trying to source the product right from the processors and going down in case of say fruits and vegetables directly to the farmer. So they're creating that platform, and that's a very interesting platform because if it works out, a lot of cost in terms of say the supply chain can be reduced, and that is something, and wastage can be say restricted. So that's a very interesting initiative coming up. I've read about this, though I have never interacted with the owners, but that's a very interesting this initiative that I realize is coming. 500 million investment has happened since 2014. So that tells you how people are upbeat about fintech, how everybody wants to talk about fintech. And I have few friends who are really very keen on investing into fintech, and we wherever meet. But again, a lot of this is invested into say known business models like supply chain, storage, say even in case of new technologies like geospatial analysis, satellite imagery, all these type of technologies you're getting investment into. But there's a lot of scope to invest into more innovative areas. So 90 plus active institutional investors are there, but say less than 10 agri-tech focused investors are there. A lot of these agri-tech focused funds I know and I personally interact with, and I can tell you that the amount of interest is very high. If you look at where does the investment goes, about 48% goes into seed, about 19% goes as grant, and about say 33% goes as Series A in say investments into the fintech or into the startups related to agri-techs. So say seed investment is huge, and that is where a lot of lot of revolution is being brought in. I normally help a lot of say delegates from various developing countries to come to India and look what are the initiatives that India is taking. Some very, very interesting initiatives we are taking, some very, very path-breaking startups you are seeing. And maybe 5 years down the line, as I told you, you'll see a lot of discussion about agri-tech. So moving forward, these sectoral say startups in the value chain. If you look at the farm management and data analytics like remote sensing, smartphone, drones, sensor, and IoT, there are Cropin. Cropin is a very, very interesting concept. A lot of work they're doing. I've been interacting with them on some some initiatives, but wonderful work they're doing. Then you have Agri-CX, you have Facile, eFasal, and all these things. What they are doing is they are creating a database. They're creating data for companies and organizations and government for that matter, to decide policies, to decide procurement plans, to decide number of things. So remote sensing they are using, smartphones they are using. There are say now solutions where a farmer can actually just through a mobile phone like this scan his field, and because it is geotagged and artificial intelligence is used, the data about his output and data about his productivity and data about his expected harvest can actually be created. It's a wonderful technology that is being used. Drones are being used to do a lot of just like satellite imagery. Now drones are used. Then predictive modeling, crop monitoring, traceability. So a lot of these things are happening. These are all production technologies. Production. These are fintech into production. And say for example, Cropin is actually using satellite imagery, drones, and remote sensing to actually see how the how the production is, how the harvest is coming up. Why this becomes important? Because a company like ITC, which is hugely dependent on procurement of agri products like wheat, rice, all these products, if they know in advance how the price, how the harvest is going to be, they can actually decide on their procurement policies much better. A company like, say, Glencore, for example, which is one of the largest importer of pulses into India, if they come to know about how is the production, say, of pulses in India, how the harvest is going to come up, you can see a lot of, say, changes in their policy. They can be more informed. Then agri-input marketing, direct to farm, direct, linking the farmer to the producer, because we are seeing a lot of biofertilizers being manufactured. in India, products produced in India. So direct to farm, that data and advisory driven. What type of product you are growing. Based on that, what type of inputs you have and who are providing those inputs. So they are doing a lot of study on that. AgroStar is there, Unnati is there, DHeart is there. So you can buy you can buy online, say through your mobile phone, you can buy inputs, you can take advice, you can see what type of say depending on your harvest, depending on your say crop, depending on the agronomic conditions, they can tell you what type of crop, what type of pesticide to use, when to use. They can give you alerts. All these type of things are there. A very interesting, say, I would call it as a fintech innovation only. The government of India is doing through, say, this last 10 years, this has picked up significantly. We're talking about the Kisan Vigyan Kendra. The Kisan Vigyan Kendra are the farmers' hub for technological understanding. And through the mobile phones, they're enabling the farmers to actually get a lot of understanding. You can call into the call center, get your harvest related information, get your production related information. They'll tell you, for example, say in your city, you know exactly what is the agronomic condition, what are the pest attacks, you know all the local level intelligence. You can guide the farmers based on that. And that is what is happening. That's another, say, technology innovations into agriculture. Output marketplace, demand aggregation. Say you have multiple say initiatives for that, and this is going to grow up because now with the advent of or with the movement of the government in terms of the new agriculture policies and the new agriculture laws, I think a lot of private companies and private fintech say companies would actually come into the agri space, which means that they would create markets. AgriBazaar is a very, very interesting innovation that is happening. It is linking the farmers to the international markets and the domestic markets. A lot of pulses are being traded through them. Demand aggregation is happening. Kirana stores, modern trade, all these companies, as I told you about Shop Kirana, what they are thinking about. Procurement via farmers, FPOs. So FPOs are the new buzzword, the farmer producer organizations. So how, say, you can link, and we are actually building a platform, say in one of my initiatives, I'm trying to build a platform where farmers cooperatives can actually offer their product, and you can standardize the quality so that the buyers say across the country can actually buy. And that is something which is work in progress, but soon it will be out. And a lot of these initiatives would come out. Agri-financing, Samunnati is a wonderful example that has brought in value chain financing, farmer onboarding, credit scoring, input linkage credits. All these things are being done, but a lot of work is happening in that. A lot of NBFCs focus specifically on agri-financing are there. Livestock management and say mechanization, novel farming. There are technology companies that are linking the farm. They're linking the farm equipment leasing to the farmers. So farmers can actually go online and find where the harvester is, where the cultivator is. Then they can hire them for their activities and create. It's like an Uber for say farm equipments. So a lot of these things are happening, and these are the areas where and all these things are in India. So stakeholders, how does the fintech structure work in India or globally? So you have the farmer at the core. Surrounding the farmers are agri-tech companies, data and technology companies, financing and financial institutions. So these things circulate, and a combination of these four, financial institutions and agri-tech companies, come together to create data, technology and financing options. And then you have the outer circle with which this interacts. So this interacts with regulators and policymakers, with the investors, say accelerators, industry bodies like FSSAI, APIDA. All these are industry bodies. Then you have the bodies like the Soybean Oil Processors Association in Indore. Then you have the Solvent Extractors Association. You have the Indian Grains and Pulses Association. So all these industry bodies they interact with because the data and technology, the financing is either an input or an output to them. For example, it is an input and an output to both regulators and policymakers. It is an input for, say, investors, because then investors can decide where to invest, how to invest, what sector of the value chain to pick up, and all those things. Incubators and accelerators, they look at these and they say, these are the tech initiatives that we are going to work with. So then production, pre-production, post-production, these are the various areas. So you have pre-production where I told you about the remote sensing, the satellite imagery, the drone use of drones for say assessing the production. There was a time in Africa when huge chunks of land were there. The British farmers had huge land, and they used to use the planes to actually, or the low-flying planes to actually do the survey of the farms on the production. And still today, it is done in Malawi for tobacco. So all these international tobacco companies that buy tobacco from Malawi, all these Godfrey Philip and all these companies who are into international markets in tobacco, they actually hire pilots to go around the country and sense how much is the production. Now, if you actually create a tech company that can do this using drones, a lot of cost can be saved. So that is what is happening. Production and post-production, a lot of companies are coming up, agri-tech companies are coming up into post-production harvesting, say handling, into quality certifications, into storage, and many more. Now let's talk about the application of fintech in agri. How do you actually apply the fintech in agri? This is something which is really very, say, interesting. How, say, you can actually do these things. So if you want to start, if you want to think about a startup, how do you actually do it? That's something we are going to talk. So the first thing is the involvement of finance. We are talking about fintech. So how do banks and financial institutions get into fintech segment and agri-tech segment? So orientation, the first step, if you look at the loan, there are 3 steps or 4 steps, you can say. Orientation, where you profile a customer, you decide what segment you want to say provide the loan in. Then is underwriting and assessment, where you decide how much loan to be given. Then there is servicing and monitoring, where you decide when you receive the loan, you receive the repayments, and you actually do the say closing of the loan. So these are the 3-4 stages, and we'll see how at these 3-4 stages you can actually do the fintech can actually play a role. So what I've done is I've created a table which gives you the category of the orientation or category of the say work, what data is required by financial institutions, how agri-tech can play a role, and finally, where would the agri-tech get the data from? So personal profile. The first thing is the personal profile of the farmer. Demographic details. This includes demographic details. Where does the farmer live? What is his background? What is his basic information like name, address, how many family members he has, what is his production, all those related things. His personal profile. So data collection, role of agri-tech is in data collection. They can automate, and we have done this in multiple countries, where the extension workers, the field workers of the government ministry or the Ministry of Agriculture, they were doing a lot of manual data working. Now what we have created is a simple database solution where they can come in and they can just enter into their say computer, and that data becomes permanent. And based on that, the information is added up in these databases. So next time, whenever they do and find some new information, it can be updated. So that's the data collection. That's where agri-tech can play a role. Agri-tech can also play a role in actually extracting this information from various sources. So you have rural banks, you have Aadhaar-related verifications, you have say FPO-related registrations where FPOs give a lot of data. You have cooperative, say, banks where there is a lot of data. So you can create a platform where all the data from these different sources can be pooled, and a personal profile of an individual farmer can be created. So this is something which is an opportunity. Then in income and cropping profile, where crop name, seasonal, annual, irrigated, unirrigated, proposed crop for the year, financial year, next financial year, arrangement for cultivation, inputs, procurement, say marketing, all these are profiling. So you can actually, once you create a profile, you can actually create a profile for farmer that, okay, what crop he grows? He grows maize, or he grows wheat. Then is it seasonal, annual? Is it irrigated, unirrigated? Because if it is irrigated, then a different set of inputs would be required. If it is unirrigated, different sets. What is his crop proposal for the year, financially? And believe me, say in a lot of these agri trading companies like Glencore or ITC or all these companies, they're actually spending a lot of money in collecting this information. If any agri-tech company, anybody of you actually can pick it up and say, I'm going to build a technology solution around that, I can tell you there would be a lot of takers. there were a lot of people who would be interested in actually getting that service, because now that the same data can be processed, can process into meaningful information for multiple users. A bank can look at and say, okay, how much my portfolio should be. That's a different use. ITC, the ITC can say, okay, so how much production, how much money I require in this area for my procurement. That's a different way of looking at it. So multiple type of things can be created. What agri-tech requires is it can create historical data of crops, their quality, output, where it has been sold. If you can just automate the mandi system, and it's a very, very politically charged up discussion. So I don't want to enter into that discussion because it's more of politics than of economics in that discussion. But if you can automate the mandi system or the mandis in India, imagine 5,000 mandis can be automated, and that would mean that you have a database of all the products that are produced in India and sold in India. So huge database and a lot of meaningful information can be created. You can use satellite imagery for, in case of the harvest assessment. You can create weather stations. You can create a lot of information about the income and cropping profile, credit history profile, deposit, loan account, loan sanctioned, outstanding. All these information are there with various banks. A lot of these banks share this information. A lot of them don't share. There are a lot of unorganized lending. So you can create a source from, source from credit bureau, from various sources. You can create an agri-tech that can create a credit profile, just like CIBIL does it for us, for an organized sector, individual. A similar CIBIL can be created for a farmer. But then the data sources have to be different. In case of an CIBIL, it pulls out data from all the organized sources. Here you have to pull out the data from a lot of unorganized sources. So that's something that becomes a challenge, but that is an opportunity as well. Underwriting credit assessment, where you say particulars of land, movable assets. So there's a company, an agri-tech company that is working exclusively on digitizing the land records. They have done it for so one of the state. They're doing it, I think, in Karnataka or one of the state. They want to do it in other states as well. It's a very interesting fintech. It's a very interesting initiative in agri-tech, where they are going and using the geosensing or the tagging systems on the mobile phones to actually digitize and create a digital database of land ownerships. So what they are doing, they are actually taking the land data from the government, and then they are actually verifying those land data by geo tagging, and then creating an geo tagged land database on which now imagine if a bank wants to lend to a farmer, just on a click of a button, that information would be available. Today, the bank has to hire a lawyer, which goes to the land record department, brings out all the records. It's a costly affair. That's a fintech that is working. So there are a lot of those areas: movable asset and properties, how much the farmer has, how much irrigation equipment he has, what are the tillers, tractors, what all. So all these are information that is available. But you need to create an interface to fetch that information. And that is what agri-techs are doing. Servicing, monitoring and collection, sowing, harvest estimates. Now, once you have lent to a farmer, you need to know how much is his production. He tells, after 3 months, he comes to you and says, because of the weather, all my crop is gone. He has sold it to somebody in the night. He has cut it and sold it to somebody. These things happen. And that creates a distrust between the farmer and the bank. But how do you actually safeguard yourself? So you have an continuous feed coming in from say a weekly or a monthly or a daily, whatever time duration you have. An agri-tech actually gives you a lot of information. They say the weather conditions are going to go bad. Your loan, the harvest has actually been affected. Your NPS would be this much. So you get an early warning. The banks get an early warning. And that is an area where a lot of fintech is working. The areas where a lot of mechanization is happening. Other applications are like labor and planting and harvesting, input purchases. These are stressed areas. So in the production segment, you can have farm mechanization, where you can have farming as a service. So where you can actually create an agri-tech which offers farming as a service. Farm mechanization, farming as a service means they would do the activities on your farm. So that is something which is organizing a lot of activities that we are doing right now in an unorganized sector. Agri-fintech solutions can be brought in, agri-input marketplaces can be created, farm management information systems can be created, electronic marketplaces can be created. In supply, you can create primary storage solutions. As I said, so we are working on a solution where we are trying to be the Uber for warehouses. So any warehouse plugs into our system, say based on that, he has a specific say policy to follow. We inspect the warehouse, certify the warehouse, and once the warehouse is certified, that is ready to accept deposit, and we create an interface with the bank so that the financing can be done against the deposit in the warehouse, and the money can be once it is sold, the money can be received by us, paid out to the warehouse for the charges, and that's a very integrated system of warehousing, financing, and sales that we are trying to build. So these are another areas of fintech that you can look at. So now I'll talk briefly about the fintech experience in Ethiopia. Something which we did. This was the time frame was 2007 to 2011 when I worked with the United Nations Development Program, and we worked on developing a solution for Ethiopia. So Ethiopia, for those who don't know, it's a country in East Africa, it is also called as Horn of Africa. When you look at the African map, Eastern Africa, just bordering with Kenya, Somalia, and Kenya, Somalia on one hand, and Eritrea on the other hand. There's a small country, not very small, but small compared to India. That's Ethiopia, and it is the diplomatic capital for Africa. The African Union is based in Ethiopia. Addis Ababa is the capital. The Economic Commission for Africa, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, is based in Ethiopia. So it's a very diplomatically important country. On one hand, it has the South Sudan as a border. On the other hand, it has Somalia as a border. So it's between two war zones. So strategically located, and a very, very interesting country. So that's Ethiopia, and that's where we introduced this fintech. So what was the problem? So the problem was in 80s, if you remember, I don't know how many of you actually remember the era of 80s, but Ethiopia was known for its starvation deaths in 80s. So the famine was there, and because of the famine and because of the shortage of the food, a lot of starvation deaths happened. And Ethiopia shot into prominence when Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt adopted the Ethiopian kids, and then it became a celebrity trend to adopt kids from Ethiopia. And that was something that their way of showing concern towards the Ethiopian people. But Ethiopia, it was a country struggling with its food storage and food value chain. The solution sought was, this started with a paper that was written by an international economist who incidentally was the person we worked with, Dr. Eleni. She wrote a paper which said that the problem in Ethiopia is not the shortage of, or not the production of food. The problem in Ethiopia is the distribution of food. The southern Ethiopia produces a lot of food that gets rotted in the fields, and the northern Ethiopia people die because of starvation. And if you can actually make a mechanism of northern Ethiopian traders to buy from southern Ethiopian markets or southern Ethiopian farmers, then you can actually come up with a solution. And that was the solution we thought we would bring in. So the solution was very simple. We would create a market that would, we would create an ecosystem, not a market, but an ecosystem where there would be a marketplace, there would be an warehousing solution, there would be a financing solution, 3 solutions put together, and we would integrate everything into a technology-driven solution so that can create an opportunity for people to buy product from say anywhere in Ethiopia. And that was something which was the idea conceived. I was hired to actually lead this whole initiative, and happy to say that this was successful. Today, Ethiopia say trades about 10 million worth say products every day through their value chain, through the value chain we created. We called it a commodity exchange, but it was more of an ecosystem. So challenges, as I said, in Ethiopia, what were the challenges that we were fighting to? We were long-standing marketing problems in terms of contract performances, rampant payment defaults, delays, renegotiations. So, definitely people were not confident, people were not able to interact with others. There were contract performance issues. So people were comfortable selling to the trader next door. They were not ready to go out and sell it to somebody who is outside their zone of influence. And that is why the southern traders would trade with southern farmers, the northern traders would trade with northern farmers, and the movement of goods would not happen. The supply chain was inefficient. Quality was important. The quality was unreliable. People used to tell us that when they buy maize and then we put it into the processing unit, they find big, say, stones into the into these sacks, and they really don't know if they are going to buy mud or they're going to buy grain. So quality was an important, say, challenge that was there. Delivery, unreliable payment at delivery puts sellers at risk, because they would say, the southern Ethiopian seller, when he goes to the northern Ethiopian buyer, they would say, okay, you come and deliver to my location, and when you deliver, then I will pay. Now the farmer has to hire a truck, put the product in the truck, travel 700 kilometers, and then go to this, say, buyer. And then if there is a contract default, he would say, no, I'm not going to buy. Then the farmer is stranded. So those were delivery issues which were there, because of which all these reasons were there, because of which the supply chain was not working. Then we had high risk, say, in terms of market exposures were very high. There were a lot of, say, things that were, say, exposed in terms of, say, the prices. The prices would fluctuate, and still they fluctuate a lot. But that time it was significant fluctuation. Integrity of frauds and manipulations were there. The product would move, and what would end up is different. So there were a lot of inefficiencies. And this led to less incentive for production at farm level, weak post-harvest handling, and below power or below potential export performance. So these were the challenges we were faced with. So then we looked at the solution. We said, bring in a system that brings integrity, order, and efficiency. Integrity, order, and efficiency to what? Integrity and order and efficiency to product. Integrity of the product means whatever is the quality is certified, whatever is promised is delivered, whatever is say written on the paper is actually what is in the warehouse. So that is the integrity of product. Integrity of transaction is, if I commit to buy or if I commit to sell, the transaction would actually take place. So defaults, contract performances are eliminated. So that brings it integrity of transactions. And integrity of transactions would come when you have integrity of actors, people acting in right faith, people acting in a rule-based mechanism. It's not at the whims of the buyer or whims of the seller. So if you actually bring in these three things, you can actually create a solution. And how we would bring in these three things, we guaranteed the quality through warehouse receipt financing. We said warehouse receipt would be introduced, electronic warehouse receipting would be introduced. And what would that mean? The warehouses that were remaining idle and owned by the government of Ethiopia were hired. And of course, this was a government project. So the agency of the government would hire those warehouses and would guarantee that anything that comes into the warehouse, a warehouse receipt would be issued against the product. So if I deposit, say, 100 kgs of maize in the warehouse, I get a receipt saying your deposit is 100 kg. The quality of the product is grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. How does grade 1, 2, 3 decide? Based on objective standards. Various parameters were there, like what should be the color of the maize, what should be the moisture content, what should be the foreign matter, and all those things. And based on that, points would be assigned to it. And if it falls into this range, it is grade 1. If it is falling into this range, grade 2, and that way. So if it is if I give you a warehouse receipt saying that this is grade 1, I guarantee that when you withdraw the product from the warehouse, you would be given what you deposited. It is like converting the warehouses into bank. If you go to a bank, you give 100 rupee cash to the manager, and he or to the teller, he would write in your account that 100 rupees deposited. When you go to the bank, you would again get 100 rupees. The bank cannot say that, oh, because of certain reasons, your note was spoiled, so your money is gone. That doesn't happen. So same way, whatever is deposited in the warehouse owner or operator should stand as a guarantor to the quality and quantity of that. And that is what we mean by electronic warehouse receipt system. More efficient trading system through standard contracts. So we said we'll bring in online trading so that anybody from any location can buy. Transparency through automated market data dissemination, which would mean that each and every individual would get an information on his phone, on television, on his. We would put up screens across the country to display the prices, so everybody would know what is the national price of the commodity. Zero default through product delivery and payment clearing settlements. T+1 settlement. That is, the day the farmer's product is sold, the farmer would be paid next day. So farmer doesn't have to wait. And for that, we have to ensure that the buyer also pays to in advance. So that structure we decided. And so what we brought in was converting a stack of grain into a stack of money using technology. So three things were used: financing, technology, and the legal infrastructure. And when these three things come together, it becomes fintech. So financing was in form of converting the warehouses to bank and making bank comfortable against the products that are stored in the warehouse. So when we started, we spoke to a bank and we said, we are creating this system. We want you to finance the stock that is stored in the warehouse. The banker said, I cannot trust the warehouse because I have done this. I have financed the product against the warehouse. And when I open the warehouse, there are only 2 pigeons inside, nothing else. So nobody is guaranteeing him. But now in the new system, because of the use of technology, leveraging the benefit of technology, we said we are going to guarantee you that if there is whatever loan you have given against the product, we will be the guarantor towards that. So product will be guaranteed by us. And that made banks a lot comfortable in lending into the against the warehouse deposits. And that would mean that we would have to employ a robust technology to ensure that the product's quality and quantity is maintained. We even did a very, very scientific study to see how much moisture loss does the product have. Because in agriculture products, all of us know when the heat goes up, they start to lose moisture. And when moisture is lost, the weight comes down. So you would actually store, say, 100 kgs and you would actually receive 98 kgs because 2 kgs of moisture has evaporated. So how much would be that? How do you account for that? And all that structure was built in. All the warehouses across the country were networked with technology. So sitting in the central office, we would know which warehouse has what quality of product and how much is the value. And the banks on their desktop would know which warehouses, what type of quality and what is the status of the warehouse. So if I take a warehouse receipt to the bank and say, this is my warehouse receipt, I want you to lend against it, the banker would put the warehouse receipt number into our system and he would know if the warehouse receipt is valid or not. So fake warehouse receipts were removed from the system, and a lot of that structure was beneficial for the banks. We created an interface with the banks, which meant that when the buyer would be allowed to sell only when the bank tells us that he has money to buy. And once the trade has happened, we would instruct the bank to debit the buyer's account and credit the seller's account, which would mean that the next day, the seller would have the money in his bank account. And that is something which was extremely, welcome. That again meant that a country like Ethiopia, where the financial inclusion was hardly 10%, we would create accounts, we would create incentives for banks to go to rural areas and open up branches. So that also led financial inclusion. So this was an integrated system that brought in a lot of, spillover benefits. The design was, it would be membership based and rule based. So all the transactions would be happening between members and their clients, just like any other exchange in the world. It would be based on rules. So nobody would be able to decide what he wants to do. It would be based on fixed rules that are communicated to everybody much in advance. Electronic warehouse receipts in rural areas. So in the rural markets, we would have warehouses. The trading is happening, say, online. So the rural warehouses have to be linked with the central database, so that when somebody is selling a product, a seller is saying, I want to sell 100 kgs of maize, the system would verify that he has 100 kgs of maize in our records in terms of warehouse, which would mean that all the warehouses should give a real-time information to the central database, and that was created. Online trading on basis of standard contracts. So anybody sitting in his office can actually look at what the quantity is and buy. He would guarantee if he's buying grade 1 quantity, what is going to be delivered. So he doesn't need to go and inspect the product. So the product may be lying 600 kilometers away from him, but he can still buy it and take the delivery from the logistic company that has been assigned the work. Market data, real-time, rural electronic boards, mobile phones, web, all these were used to spread out this information. We installed 50 electronic display boards, just like advertising boards in rural areas. And because the connectivity was very low, we used a GSM, connectivity. So GSM connectivity is basically, it works on an SMS-based mechanism. So you don't even need an internet. So we can text the data from a mobile phone to the board, and the board would display it in the required format. So that was an innovation that we brought in, and it was wonderful because I remember in the rural villages, we started getting pictures where people would come and stand in front of the board to see what is this going to show. And they would know in the national level, what is the price? So now when they are selling, they know at what price they have to sell. And it was an empowering, decision. A T+1 settlement, next day the clearing would happen, the money would be credited, compliance, market surveillance, all these things we brought in. So this was the design where farmers would deposit the commodity in the warehouses. The warehouses would do the quality certifications, and then the quality certification warehouse receipt would be sent to the exchange, and the exchange would then organize trading for these products. And when the trading is done, the exchange would evaluate. On one hand, it has the balances of the warehouse deposits. On the other hand, it has the balances of the money. So buyers and sellers cannot default. They transact. Then the ownership of the warehouse receipt would be transferred to the seller. From seller to the buyer, the ownership of the money, the bank account transfer would happen from this buyer's account to the seller's account, everything in one day. And that would mean that you have to leverage technology, because you are talking about spreading across the country. And we did that. We were able to successfully implement that. Now, this is the challenge. The first thing which we went to do was, say when the project started, we went and met the Deputy Prime Minister, whose image you are seeing. And he said to us, welcome to Ethiopia. And that was a welcome, my friends, to Ethiopia. That is a statement I still remember. And what he said after that was very, very significant. He said, you come from a part of the world where a lot of things you take for granted. But in Ethiopia, if you want to buy a pen, that would be still a process. So that is something which was very significant, because we realized that. And I'll give you an anecdotal story about that, which relates to the second picture that I have shown here. So we created this structure, we created this thing, we launched the operations, and we started to say, we were very upbeat that, wow, we have built a wonderful system. Now, the second day of trading, I still remember, I was the trading manager, I was the trading head, I was heading the trading operations, and my colleague was the IT manager. So I am not a technology guy, I'm a market guy. I'm a domain guy. So my technology colleague who was the vice president of technologies, he was there. And he received a call from a rural village. He said, we have a deposit that has come in, but we can't accept the deposit. He said, so we asked the standard question, okay, do you have problems in terms of, say, the connectivity? He said, no, the connectivity is there. So do you have the problems with the documentation? No, everything is fine. Then what is the problem? He said, the system is not letting me go forward. I said, why? He said, because the system was that you have to record all the data. So the data would mean what is the name of the farmer or depositor, what is the say name of the product, what is the quality, what is the location, everything. And then lastly, what is the truck number or the number plate of the truck that has brought in the deposit, what is the driver's name. Now, this is because just to track where did the deposit comes from. He said, I cannot put in the truck number. He said, why? Just put in. He said, no, the deposit has actually come on donkey backs. And that is the time when we realized that in rural Ethiopia, trucks don't work. It's the donkeys that work. And how do you assign a number plate to a donkey? My colleague was like, he came from Accenture. He was the person who actually implemented a lot of security solutions after 9/11. So somebody who knows technology to the core. And he was like, oh my God, we never realized that this can be a challenge. Then we created a bypass. I said, okay, just name the donkeys at D1, D2, D3 and prepare a physical record which would actually didn't accept the deposit. And it worked. But what happens is when you're the thing that I was speaking about in the early part of my discussion, that you need to understand the ground reality. We missed out on the ground reality that the deposits would come on donkey backs, not on trucks. And we did not account for that. Our model did not account for that. And that was the stage where we felt that the whole model is going to go for a toss. So that is something which we really need to be careful. But we circumvented and we created a market that today transacts $10 million worth commodities every day. $10 million worth commodities are given from the seller to the buyer in physical form, of course, in electronic warehouse receipt format, and $10 million money transfers from the buyer's account to the seller's account every day. And that is a successful model that we have implemented. And this was a challenge. Second challenge was we went to the banks and the bank said, are you crazy? What are you talking about T+1 settlement? We cannot do this because we don't have even a national payment system. Imagine in absence of an RTGS or an NEFT type of arrangement, you have to create an interbank transfer system. And we created that system by creating the accounts within each other's bank. So bank A would have account in bank B would have an account in bank A, and through their accounts, this transaction would happen, and the banks would then settle their accounts, say later on. And we created that. And what that led to, after 2 years of our operations, the central bank or the Reserve Bank of Ethiopia actually decided to introduce the national payment system. So we introduced this initiative in absence of a national payment system, where the intra-bank, I'm using the word intra-bank, check clearances were taking 7 days, interbank check clearances were taking 1 month. We created a system where the farmer would be paid next day of trade. And that attracted people like Melinda Gates, that attracted the World Bank president, that attracted Bob Geldof, the rock star, named Warren Buffett's son, Howard Buffett, came to see this. So we created a structure that became so popular that everybody in Africa wanted to replicate it. And that has been my work since 2011. So this was the first initiative that we took, and a path-breaking initiative that we took. And what it created the role of formal financing system and banks into the commodity markets. We created clients to have lower default risk. Banks can offer commodity-linked products. When we created a fintech-driven commodity pipeline, where from the farmer to the exporter, everything was fintech, innovated. And that is what is a big success. And that is something which is one of the biggest biggest successful projects in my life. And that's why I thought this is a very interesting example of how fintech has actually changed agriculture in Ethiopia. The outcome, Ethiopia became the third largest exporter of coffee. Just after Vietnam and Colombia, Ethiopia is the third largest exporter of the coffee in the world. Sesame farmers, sesame still. The sesame farmers started to get 76% of the export price as against 32%. So we actually doubled their income. And this was because of the technology interventions that we have brought in. So you can see in the pictures how now they are doing the online trading. We had the initial, you can see the display boards, and it was a wonderful environment. And the farmers, I remember a 60-year-old farmer coming to me and telling me that I never in my life ever imagined that I would be able to dictate the price, but you have done it happen today. And that you means the whole team. And we had a wonderful team that actually executed it. And that was something which we really proud of in our careers, that we actually introduced an intervention that revolutionized not only the agriculture in one country, but a whole continent. And everybody is now replicating that. And that's what has been a buzzword. So with that, I'll stop here. I think I have given a lot of things about agri-tech and how agri-tech can be used, and say how you can actually create a startup within agri-tech. So I'll stop here, and I'll now give you a chance to ask questions so that we can discuss it better. So thank you very much, and open for questions.
Thank you, sir. Again, wonderful experiential learning it is, because with what you did, I mean, how you code, how you transit, wow, wonderful. So house is open. Participants, anyone wants to ask any question? As that session was very informative, sir, that's true. So we got few of the reviews. The case study was really good, excellent sessions.
Good morning, Neha ma'am. Good morning, Bharat sir.
Good morning, madam.
It's Dr. Ritu from Hyderabad. Sir, it's a great learning, and the case study is awesome. I remember my college time when Ethiopia was it's in a underdeveloped, and it was what you have shared. It is a very nice case study. My one concern is that I'm an entrepreneur also, and from UP. I like to start an agri-tech in Meerut, Delhi. So can I get an assistance for this, and how can I start agri-tech startup?
See, there are multiple areas in which you can get assistance. You can get technical assistance from. There's a company. There's a company called Agri Technology, which is a Government of India company based in Delhi, which is actually generalizing or making this technologies, innovative technologies, available for entrepreneurs. So you can actually get a lot of technical assistance from them. If you Google it, you'll find it. If not, I can share you the contact details. It's a wonderful company to interact with. So that's the technical part of it. When it comes to the financial support, I think there are a lot of Startup India initiatives, especially for women entrepreneurs. There's a whole lot of initiatives that the government of India has taken, and startup into agri-tech is something which is a priority sector initiative. So I think in agri-tech, if you have a viable business model and you have a viable, say, idea, a lot of support from the starts from SIDBI and NABARD, National Agriculture Bank and National Agriculture and Rural Development Bank of India. You can get a lot of say grant as well as support. And then there are a lot of fund managers based in Delhi and all, and I can share some details with you of that as well. They can also look into, but right now what is happening is a lot of these fund managers really not investing into concepts. They're investing into say established or proof of concept has to be there. So first layer of innovation you have to actually introduce and show that it's successful. Then a lot of these agri-tech say angel investors would actually come in. So I think that so between them, a lot of that information, again, you have to really understand the value chain and really define where you want to create that intervention.
As per you, I need two things. One is a business model, and second is that first I have to take an initiative and I have to prove that it is workable. Then the fund or seed or any government will help me, right?
Government can actually give you loan more on a bankable project itself. May not be very high, but sufficient enough to create a prototype and say show it to the market, and then probably then the agri-tech investors would come in.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions? Even sir, Ravindra Jadhav sir, he had given, I was just reading that message. So it was like truly educating a farmer. It's again a challenge, but you did it for them. So wonderful, sir. So that's all for the session 1 for the day. Participants, sir, we'll be not ending with the meeting, right?
Whatever your model is, I can actually mute off and say rejoin in about 20 minutes now. 11:45 we start the next session.
11:45, right? So we'll be starting with 11:45. So we are not ending up with the meeting, still continue. So just a 15 minutes break, quick break. One, please make sure to be here again on time. We'll start sharp at 11:45, right, sir?
Yeah.
Fine. So thank you all. Thank you, sir. See you again.